Hey everybody, it's us. Look at that. We just popped up from right behind the logo of the show. How cool was that? High tech stuff going on over here at Roger and Me. Welcome everybody. Welcome to Roger and Me, a podcast celebrating the late great Roger Ebert by keeping his unique spirit of film criticism alive through his own words. My name is Brett Arnold, and I'm a freelance film critic and podcaster who you may know from the New Flesh podcast, a podcast about horror movies and all things tangentially related to horror and the horror lifestyle. But today, I will be your tour guide through the first ever episode of Siskel and Ebert to ever air back on public access television in November 1975. It's so old, in fact. How old was it? It's so old, in fact, that it wasn't even called Siskel and Ebert yet. It was called Opening Soon, ... at a theater near you. And if I know one thing about a good title, it's that it should have an ellipsis in it. So obviously it really stuck through time, that title. 7 movies were discussed on the inaugural episode of Opening Soon at a Theater Near You, featuring Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, 2 of which I would say have become all-time classics. It just happens that 2 all-time classics were discussed in November of 75. And I would say 5 movies you probably haven't even heard of, because I consider myself a film buff, and I hadn't heard of at least 4 of them, I don't think. And on this episode, as I mentioned, or if you don't know what the premise of the show is, we're going to revisit the original episodes of that series, Siskel and Ebert, hear what Gene and Roger have to say in this episode, in their first ever televised appearance, with a particular focus on the 2 films that haven't been lost to time this week. And then, so every Tuesday, we'll be here rewatching an old episode, discussing the movies they're in. Every Friday, we'll also be here reviewing the new movies that come out that day theatrically. And since Nope was the only movie that really came out last week, and because I loved it so much and was eager to discuss everything about it, including what it all means, we absolutely cheated and broke the format of the show on the very first episode to just talk about it at length, explaining all the metaphors and what everything means. So that was not a good start to show what the show is, but I had fun, and I hope you did too. So this is technically the second episode, but it feels like the first. I'm loving the energy. And our first guest is someone I'm so glad is here, especially for this first episode, who I DM'd to ask if he was down to watch Siskel and Ebert with me. And he was like, brother, I already am. Jason Bailey is here. Jason, hello.
Hey, Brad. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
I'm so good. Thank you so much for being here. So why are you watching Siskel and Ebert right now? What's going on?
It's here's the thing, and this explains a lot. I quite literally watched the original Siskel and Ebert show when I was like an actual child. When I'm old enough, I'm 46. So like circa, 80, 79, 80, 81, the sneak previews run. I'm a little kid with a very young mother who would typically make a bit of a big deal of Friday night. And so Saturday mornings I was on my own. Well, you watch cartoons when you're a kid, which I did. But then if she had really tied one off the night before, the cartoons ended, we didn't have cable yet in our house. We had 4 channels, and the 3 cartoon channels all started showing sports. And even at that age, I was like, fuck that. And so I switched to the 4th channel, the only other channel, one morning, and it was our local PBS affiliate, and it was sneak previews. I don't know why I stopped, except that there really was nothing else on. Maybe they were talking about a kid movie that episode or something. But for whatever reason, I was really drawn to this show. And then I became like a regular watcher of this show, at age 5 or 6. So I don't know. Maybe it's like how, adults will revisit like episodes of Scooby-Doo. Like it's something that's very comforting to me, partially because I remember, watching that when I was really small.
I'm so glad you said all that, because that is kind of my story as well, except I'm 30 years old. So my story starts with me watching like Ebert and Roper mostly, not Siskel, which no disrespect to the Roper.
No disrespect.
No disrespect to Richard Roper. I'm not even going to say what I was going to say, because Richard Roper is going to be on this show one day. And
he is.
And we love and respect Richard Roper. And obviously, I grew up reading him as well as Roger. But my history also stems from like an embarrassingly early age to like I also had to like try to justify like why did I care about these two older guys talking about movies that I probably couldn't see yet, but there was something there. And I don't know where you're from, Jason. You can tell us where are you from.
I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas. I lived in Kansas until I was 30, and I've lived in New York ever since. Those are the only two places I've lived.
Right on. I say that because I'm from Skokie, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. So I grew up thinking that reading
local heroes.
Yes. I grew up thinking Roger Ebert was like a very special privilege that I had as a local. And I don't know when I realized that like not only does everybody in my town know Roger Ebert, but everybody in the nation and actually the world knows Roger Ebert. And that's thanks to the syndication of this program that we're here to discuss every week. And we will, I believe, naturally, hopefully, through the podcast, kind of give the history of the show and how it, all its iterations and how it came to be and why it was so popular and stuff like that. But yeah, growing up in Chicago, reading Ebert, it wasn't just, I'm trying to think of, again, I don't know why it attracted me, a child, but it just clearly like people who love movies have loved them all their lives. And we all have that same story kind of, yeah, we just were interested in it.
It is true. It is true. And I think the subject matter certainly does account for some of it. I also think some of it, maybe I say this as a pair of Midwesterners, a significant part of it was them personally as well. Like I sensed when I would first watch that show when I was a little kid, I think I was drawn to them because they reminded me literally of my uncles. Like my dad is one of 4 brothers. And so they're all these sort of like gregarious, Midwest heavy set dudes, with like, but who have a really particular energy when they talk about art and especially about movies and television. Like they really kind of get into it like that. And I recognize that in them right away.
It definitely didn't look like anything else I was watching on TV with talking heads. Like the talking heads of like the news didn't have the same energy as Ebert and Siskel and Ebert did when they were talking about something. And like news segments did have movie, they would talk about movies, but it was not, it was like a clip package. Well, I guess the show has clip packages too, but we'll get into everything. I wanted to say that when reading Ebert, it wasn't just to get a sense of the movie that I wanted to see. Because I was a kid, it was often, I have to not only read this Ebert review once to myself, I have to then prepare a presentation to give to my parents because they were the ones who had the car and the money to buy movie tickets and the, adultedness that I needed to go see the R-rated movies. So my favorite example of like a Roger Ebert's eclectic taste steering a family wrong is how I convinced my parents to take me to see the Paul Walker film Running Scared because Roger Ebert loved it. Gave it I want to say 3-star review, loved all the John Wayne things, appreciated how batshit the movie was. So cut to me, who that movie was 2004, 2005. I was 13 or 14. Like teenager, probably could have had a good time seeing it without my parents, but my parents came and my sister came too. I remember we all were sitting there, and I think it's within 5 minutes, not even, when Vera Farmiga is getting fucked on a washing machine. And I'm like, Roger, you son of a bitch, you did it again. But that is something that has always spoken to me. The fact that like Roger Ebert was this like arbiter of taste. And like could really, I saw it locally as someone who worked at a movie theater in Evanston, Illinois. That was like, it was a Cine Arts 6 and Century 12. So it was like 12 mainstream movies and 6 art house movies. The art house side was mostly senior citizens who you'd learn from, just being there long enough, who all came to see shit specifically because Roger Ebert told them to. So he had such pull that I found such, like me, I'm pulled by him. And like this 90-year-old woman who brought a ticket and is trying to get a refund for In Bruges because Roger Ebert liked it. Like I just love the idea of Roger Ebert being this force that was like, thumbs up, thumbs down, give your money to this movie, don't give your money to this movie. And like, because it was the only voice at the time, It was so impactful. Before we just start watching the episode and just get into that and all that entails, I have Roger Ebert's, where's the camera? Life Itself here.
Yeah.
A wonderful memoir that literally had me crying on the opening page, just because it's like you're reading about a man who knows he's dying, and it's rough, and it's honestly an incredible book. Some of his best writing he's ever done. But I'm specifically going to just try to find a portion that it talks about specifically his relationship with Gene Siskel leading up to opening soon at a theater near you. And then we will just get right into it. So yeah, reading on a podcast. What is this? What's happening? Just reading a book on camera. This is so weird. Gene Siskel and I were like tuning forks. Strike one and the other would vibrate at the same frequency. In a group together, we were always intensely aware of each other. Sometimes this took the form of a camaraderie, sometimes mutual support, sometimes hostility. We were aware. If something happened that we both thought was funny, but weren't supposed to, God help us if one caught the other's eye. We usually thought the same things were funny. That may be a sign of intellectual communion. Gene died on February 20th, 1999. He's in my mind almost every day. He became less like a friend than like a brother. In 1977, we were on a talk show with Buddy Rogers, once Mary Pickford's husband, and he said, "You guys have a sibling rivalry. Your problem is you both think you're the older brother." Our image was of a state of permanent feud, but our feelings had nothing to do with the image. We knew the buttons to push on each other, and we both made little effort to hide our feelings, warm or cold. Once Gene and I were involved in a joint appearance with another Chicago media couple, Steve Dahl and Jerry Mayer. It was a tribute to them. They were pioneers of freeform radio, even influencing the young Howard Stern. Gene and I were known for our rages against each other, and Steve and Gary were known for their accord. They gave us advice about how to work together as a successful team. Soon afterwards, Steve and Gary, I'm not sure if it's Gary or Jerry, apologies, had an angry public falling out that has lasted till this day. Gene and I would never have had that happen to us. In our darkest brooding moments, when competitiveness, resentment, and indignation were at a roiling boil, we never considered it. We were linked in a bond beyond all disputing. You may be an asshole, Gene would say, but you're my asshole. If we were fighting, get out of the room. But if we were teamed up against a common target, we were lethal. Our first time on his show, Howard Stern never knew what hit him. He picked on one of us, and we were both at his throat. We both thought of ourselves as full-service, one-stop film critics. We didn't see why the other one was necessary. We had been linked in a Faustian television format that brought us success at the price of autonomy. No sooner had I expressed a verdict on a movie, my verdict, than here came Siskel with the arrogance to say I was wrong, or for that matter, the condescension to agree with me. It really felt like that. It was not an act. When we disagreed, there was incredulity. When we agreed, there was this kind of relief. In the television biz, they talk about chemistry. Not a thought was given to our chemistry. We just had it. Because from the day the Chicago Tribune made Gene its film critic, we were professional enemies. We never had a single meaningful conversation before we started to work on our TV program. Alone together in an elevator, we would study the numbers changing above the door. Making this rivalry even worse was the tension of our early tapings. They were held together with baling wire by Thea Flom, the PBS producer who created the original format. She dealt with us like children. Once we got fresh coffee and were told we couldn't take it in the studio, we ganged up and told her we wanted to drink it first. She had a mother's diplomacy. Start drinking it now and walk down to the studio slowly. It would take 8 hours to get one show in the can, with breaks for lunch, dinner, and fights. I would break down, or he would break down, or one of us would do something unexpected and throw the other off, or the accumulating angst would make our exchanges seem simply bizarre. There are many witnesses to the terror of those days. Only when we threw away our clipboards and 3x5 cards did we get anything done. We started ad-libbing and the show began to work. We found we could tape a show in under an hour. That is a note that I've taken in my podcasting experience. Don't take notes. Just fucking turn it on and start talking. At first, to my detriment or to the success of the show, we'll find out. At first, the show was once a month on the Chicago PBS station WTTW, and it was called Opening Soon at a Theater Near You. I love his description of the show because you're about to see. It was pretty awkward and not a great start. We sat stiffly in director's chairs, holding clipboards, and seemed to have slipped onto TV from a local access channel. We had no chemistry. We barely had a relationship. Working to reinvent the stiff format, Thea threw out the chairs, put us in the balcony, and worked with us over her dining room table on Sunday nights. The show moved up to twice a month for its second year and then became weekly. By the end at PBS, after raises negotiated by Thea, we were making $325 an episode. At the time we left PBS for Tribune Entertainment, which is the era we will talk about next week, I think we could have stayed for $1,000 a week. But PBS then, and even more now, didn't have money like that. As recently as this year, Thea observed, Gene was a natural, but Roger was really bad at first. If she told me that at the time, I would have collapsed. I had stage fright. I was alert to every disapproving nuance from Siskel. I could be thrown off by any distraction. I would dry up in the middle of a thought. I slowly got better. By the time the show went weekly, I had eased up, and then eventually it got to be easy and a pleasure, and Siskel and I lowered our guard when we realized we'd gotten ourselves into something good. Anything to say on that before we just jump into the show?
I read that book when it came out.
Yeah.
And I haven't revisited it since because it is an emotional read, especially after losing him. Sometimes I forget what a terrific writer of prose he is. Like just good at the prose.
That's what struck me about this book. And then there's one other book that I would describe as like prosy. And I don't have the fucking title here, and I wish I did. It's the book he wrote that's just a diary of his time at Cannes.
Oh, yeah, 2 weeks in the Midday Sun.
2 weeks in the Midday Sun is so brilliant, and it like my wife and I already have plans to go to Cannes next year that I would say are very. it was inspired by the book for sure. Like it opens with a map that he hand drew.
Wow.
That I was like, we're gonna hit all these places that probably don't exist anymore. But you're right, the prose. And like you get a taste of it there, just talking about his relationship with Gene. But the book is full of.
It's a beautiful book.
It's a beautiful book, 100%.
Yeah, but no, yes, that's that's an accurate assessment, I believe, of what's going on in the first episode. I mean, the one thing that I always think about when I think about this is the one that he didn't mention or directly, which is just that they're so tentative and quiet, and they.
Yes.
Well, here we are. I'm opening soon at a theater near you, and I'm Roger Ebert. And you like it's all at that like.
There's no energy. Yeah.
No, and I mean, there's no energy, and like they're at this weird volume where it almost seems like there's like a baby in the room, or they're trying to like not wake from its nap.
Don't wake the baby. We're recording.
It's very strange.
Yeah. That's so funny. There's a. I wish I knew the line. I'll obviously point it out when it happens. But like that tone mixed with like a joke that Gene tries to make, it's so awkward. Just like throw like a I don't know, and like, I don't know. It just doesn't register like as like humor to me. Like it's very stoic and weird.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Here is we're just gonna play it from the beginning, and I guess I'll stop when I think it's a good point to start talking about. I'm assuming One Flew is first, but we'll find out
after Gene's pointed complaints about a film festival audience applauding.
Oh my God, this is gonna be good. I'm so
weirdest
excited.
Little dead voiced rant. Okay, here we go.
Well, the beauty of not this being a show that I'm doing independently and like not with RogerEbert.com or whatever is that. I am like there are things like you just said. What Gene says is like ridiculous. There are going to be things that I don't agree with Ebert on over the years, and I want to get that out now and say that like Ebert was against like in the 80s, like he had a whole episode like against like Spit on Your Grave and like advocating for horror to like not be released. So like these are things that I vehemently disagree with, but I still love the man, and you know. People are complicated, and we're gonna get into all of it. Don't worry, this isn't just a fluffer experience. We're gonna get into everything. All right, here's the very first episode of Opening Soon at a Theater Near You.
Right out the gate with the blackface. First shot. Jolson in blackface. I find this opening fascinating, though, because it really is a snapshot of, like, this is what the movies were circa 1975. Like, that's who it is.
You're
and top build, that jumps out. that on this show Ebert was top billed and
yeah.
was notoriously grumpy about the fact that they were known as Siskel and Ebert. I mean, maybe not legitimately, but
sorry. Yeah, that is interesting. Actually, I just paused because I wanted to talk about that for a second. So
yeah,
the show is called Opening Soon at a Theater Near You with Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. So you're saying point of contention for Ebert.
He would joke about it later, but in that way that they talk sometimes, where it's like they're joking but they mean it. Someone asked once why they were in that order. I saw I think an interview maybe just with Roger, and he immediately, I mean, like it was a prepared answer. He said, "I have no idea. I'm first alphabetically. I'm the one with the Pulitzer. Somehow we're Siskel and Ebert." Which is like,
well, I think if I'm just being like an aestheticist, I think it rolls off the tongue better, maybe. But
Siskel
that's not something Ebert wants to hear. Yeah, Siskel and Ebert sounds good. Ebert and Siskel, maybe it's probably just because it's trained in my brain that way.
Just been saying it the other way for 30 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. All right, back to the show.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to it.
I went back a little. Whoops. We're working out the kinks here. Here we go.
The name of our show is Opening Soon at a Theater Near You.
I wish I could turn them up.
About the movies. And this is Roger,
yes.
Film critic from the Chicago Sun-Times.
And right over here is Gene Siskel, the film critic from the Chicago Tribune and Channel 2 News.
The point of our show is to sort of be a news magazine about movies, and we want to show you what's playing in town, what's coming to town, and also maybe take you behind the scenes and show you a little bit about the movie business.
Right. Tonight we're going to do a little wrap-up on the Chicago Film Festival, which ended last
week.
Okay,
I just want to say, just from an aesthetic standpoint, the thing that is most immediately earmarking this for the era is it's a tie between Roger's sport coat and
very sick sport coat.
Yeah, and Gene's porno stash. Like that's you if you were just looking at the episode, you might think it were from a later era, except for those two very clear markers. I can't remember how far in Gene lost the mustache, but it was pretty early, and I think a wise decision.
Well, that'll actually come up when we talk about Dog Day Afternoon, because Pacino had a mustache for one day on that shoot.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you're right. The fit check. We had to stop and do a fit check. Roger Ebert looking fly right now.
It's a good outfit. I mean,
it's a great outfit.
Solid big man combination.
There's a portion of film Twitter that is like Roger Ebert fit God, and they're always posting his outfits from like the 70s and 80s. And I just want to cheer that on. We love it. Keep doing it. I also want to mention, if you're listening to this right now as a podcast, the YouTube episode is out there where you can literally watch it, the clips of Ebert and Roper along with us. That's on YouTube, which is where you can watch it if you're just listening, just so you know, in case you're like, we're talking about what he's wearing, this is very annoying. It's on YouTube as well. Okay, here we go.
Mr. Quilp, going to look at an MGM retrospective. We're going to look at Conduct Unbecoming, which is a rather unbecoming film. And Gene, the festival had the world premiere last week of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which just had the audience tearing up the seats with joy.
Yeah, and also
tearing up the seats with joy. Like the most exciting description said with the least excitement of anything ever. I love it. It's incredible.
No, I mean, the thing that is striking, is the passage from the book that you read that they mentioned in the intro that Gene had done some TV before. Like he had been, the movie guy on the evening news, had some training at this point. And Ebert had none. So we're seeing almost like a William Hurt, Albert Brooks dynamic happening here.
Yeah, it's really something. Sorry to keep interrupting. I'm trying not to do that, but it's too fun.
Okay.
No, that's okay. If you feel like it, do it. I don't want to stifle anybody.
Turning up a little my enjoyment of the film. They were applauding even during the credits. As Jack Nicholson's name came on the screen for the credits, the place went wild. Same thing for the director, Miloš Forman.
They even applauded the cinematographer.
Yeah, there were two of them, too.
Can you imagine them at like a Sundance premiere now? Like, holy shit, they applaud the fucking production company logos at the beginning of those things.
This is the exchange I meant to highlight when I referenced the funny thing earlier. Like that exchange of just like their cadence of, they applauded the cinematographer even. Yes, there's two of them. Like, I don't know, something about that back and forth. Like there's a hint of magic there. But
Yes.
it's all very silly the way they do it. Okay.
Yes, there were two of them.
There were two of them, yeah. Two cinematographers. It's crazy. Oh, but that is an interesting story. Well, I guess we haven't talked about Cuckoo's Nest yet. But yeah, Bill Butler and Haskell Wexler both DP'd on that movie. Haskell Wexler is credited because, according to Sidney Lumet on the commentary, he shot for 31 days and Bill Butler shot for 30. And that's how it worked out with whatever the credit union
order.
The credit order was. So Haskell Wexler's a cinematographer, even though he did half the work. Very interesting. Okay, here we go.
And the film is based on Ken Kesey's 1962 novel about a guy who was taken from a work farm over to a mental institution to be tested to see if he's faking it or not, to see if he's mentally ill also. And the film stars Jack Nicholson as that mental patient, and it's another aggressive, enthusiastic role for Nicholson. Some people, especially the people at United Artists who are trying to sell tickets to you, are putting out the theory that this may be Nicholson's 5th Academy Award nomination in 6 years.
It certainly is the case that it's often been bridesmaid but never a bride for Nicholson. He's been nominated again and again. He makes that trek out to the Santa Monica Boulevard or the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion every year, and he never wins anything. He was nominated for the first time and as a supporting actor in Easy Rider. He played kind of a drunken Southern lawyer. I thought the picture really came alive when he was on the screen. Wasn't so good when he wasn't.
Then I think he had his best leading performance in 5 Easy Pieces, where he plays Robert Arroyoca Dupuy, a failed pianist who's masquerading as an oil rigger, and it was a great performance by Jack.
Also, The Last Detail, he played a Marine shore patrol, picking up a guy and taking him off to the brig.
And then as the detective in Chinatown.
I thought that was the best American movie of last year, Roman Polanski's Chinatown, with Nicholson as a private eye in Los Angeles.
Now, in this film, Nicholson plays the patient, and he has right away an early confrontation with an evil nurse named Ratchet.
If Mr. McMurphy doesn't want to take his medication orally, I'm sure we can arrange that he can have it some other way. But I don't think you'd like it, Mr. McMurphy.
You'd like it, wouldn't you? Well, give it to me.
I remember being struck going back to these shows by how long the clips are.
Yes.
By even by the late era of this show, they were running much shorter clips, as opposed to just like turning over 5 minutes on PBS to a scene from Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh,
yeah, that is notable for sure. It's also like they're talking about 7 movies in 22 minutes, and you're putting 5 of this in there. Yeah, it's crazy. It's also, I'm struck by the meta layer of us watching them watching a clip.
Correct.
It cut to them. It was very funny.
Yeah, the quality, I gotta say, the image quality by the time you are watching this clip from Cuckoo's Nest, it's gonna be like a 7th generation Betamax.
That wasn't very smart.
I was gonna say, for these portions on the podcast or on YouTube, I even could update it and put a better clip in there. But I'm not gonna take the time to do that.
Of course not. No, these.
From The Cuckoo's Nest. The part of Nurse Ratched, the big nurse, is played by an actress named Louise Fletcher. Some of you may have seen her in the Robert Altman film, Thieves Like Us, which is really the film she was discovered in. Altman, once again, making one of these discoveries of ordinary people who seem to have extraordinary abilities.
She was the wife of the producer of that film, Jerry Bick. And
maybe that helped Altman to discover her.
I think so. I expected a good performance out of Nicholson, and he gave a good one.
I mean, that's a pretty good little.
He really surprised me. In the film, or in the book, Nurse Ratched, called the Big Nurse in the book, is just a real evil person. She's sort of like a machine. There's a lot of machine imagery in the book. And in this film, Louise Fletcher brings another component to the film completely. She has sort of a ambiguous sexual attraction to Nicholson, so you really don't know any kind of direction and way the film's going to go. So I thought her performance surprised me and was one of the pleasant surprises in the film.
It's a good film. It's a little bit of a disappointing film, I think. It wasn't quite the overwhelming experience that I'd expected. And I think one of the problems was that Forman didn't just stay with the human elements of these people. We meet the people in the ward, we begin to care about them and their problems, and that's good. And Nicholson is good when he's interacting with those people. But when Forman backs up and tries to make his big points about the establishment and authority and sanity and insanity, I think at that point the movie loses its touch a little bit.
I think he also backs up in trying to give Nicholson so many great scenes. It's almost like United Artists can count another $1 million in gross every time Nicholson.
What a
will have
hilarious
riot
criticism.
scene.
You gave Jack Nicholson too many good scenes.
Yeah. Why not throw in a couple of bad scenes just to keep the performance even keeled?
Oh, hilarious. All right, I'll let him keep going, but I think he's about to finish, and then we can talk about it. Hold on.
So many.
Okay,
and the film is packed so solid that I think that the essence of Jack Nicholson is lost just by overkill sometimes.
All the same, the audience did love it, as we mentioned, at the film festival, and it loved it for scenes like this one. Nicholson,
they were even
all
clapping
the guys out playing basketball.
Yeah,
including
and they're
about
showing a second clip, if you can believe it.
Who hasn't spoken in 12 years. He's allegedly a deaf mute. And as we can see in this clip, the chief is not exactly a natural athlete.
Here, up. Raise your hands up. Up. That's it. That's it. Up. All the way up. All the way up. That's a baby. All right. Huh? Okay, now jump up in the air and put it in the basket, T. Jump up and dunk it in. Jump up in the air and stuff that in there, T.
That's how they used to bleep things,
Yeah,
folks.
just silence it.
Just dead silence. And then they decided to replace it with comical word substitutions that would go viral.
Yeah?
You're looking all right. Get right over here for a second. Just stand right there. Just get down a little bit. All right. Stand up. Stand up. Go ahead. That's a baby. All right. You got her. All right. Now over there. Wait. Hit me, Chief. I got the moves. I got him, Chief. All right. Hold it right there. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. That's it. Thank you, Chief. Now, hold it right there. Now, take the ball. You jump up and put it in the basket. See what I mean? Just put it in. Chief, hold still. All right, Chief. Now, jump up and put her in the basket, Chief. Jump up and put her in the basket. Not you, Bancini. Raise up, Bancini. Where you going?
This clip,
Where
the
you
quality,
going?
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Defense. Get back.
Like that.
Back.
A Rottweiler got a hold of that tape.
Going at it. General, get this man around here. That's it. Back. Over to Chief. Fast break. Fast break. Hit me, Chief. Hit me, baby.
Later on in the film, the chief really does get into basketball, and when he really starts to play, that's one of the great moments, really. The audience really loved it. So did I.
You know, we've been talking sort of negatively about the film. I think that's maybe because we have such great expectations for Nicholson. He's my favorite actor. Miloš Forman is a distinguished director, a very subtle one. And in this film, there's a little bit of heavy hand being laid on. And so when we have high expectations, sometimes we're really rough on the films that we like, and the films that we don't really expect anything from, we're a little bit easy on.
We shouldn't allow it to be lost in our discussion that we do think it's a good film, basically.
Yeah, and one worth seeing. It's playing right now, I guess, at the Esquire Theater, and it's going to be there for a long time. It's going to be a very popular film.
Well, they nailed that part.
That's true.
Is a very popular film. All right, let's talk about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for a minute. I just want to say up top, this is not a show where we gatekeep or make fun of people who haven't seen these movies.
Sure.
This may be the first time for some of you, and I think that's great, because I'm going to go ahead and admit an embarrassing fact about myself that I saw. It's not that embarrassing, and it's kind of embarrassing. I saw Good Burger first before I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I must say, the scene that directly references and parodies it was really lost on me as a 7-year-old or whatever. But I just say that to say, you know, it's a movie that has permeated through pop culture, that is like referenced all the time in pop culture and other stuff, including children's movies for some reason. That Good Burger weirdly has a riff on Cuckoo's Nest that features George Clinton from the Parliament Funkadelic. It is one of the strangest movies. Maybe one day we'll cover it on this show. Abe Vigoda's in it and Linda Cardellini. Good movie. Anyway, we're here to talk about Cuckoo's Nest. I have Ebert's 75 review contemporarily from the time, and I have his Great Movies 2003 that I can read from at some point. But let's talk about your relationship with this movie. Did you see it when you were a kid? Did you see it when you were an adult? Did you love it? Do you think it holds up? All these things.
This is one of the reasons that I'm glad that this is one of the movies they're talking about and that we're discussing their perspective on, because this was a case weirdly where I read Roger's original review before I saw the movie as like a teenager. Like I saw it around, I don't know, 15 or 16 when you're very impressionable for those at that outside input. So because when I was about, I don't know, 10, I discovered the movie yearbook. Or I think that was in that period, it was still the movie home companion. And,
Yes.
and I would just go to like the bookstore and read that, you know, like in little bits and pieces. So my birthday's in November. Every year, the new edition had just come out, like a couple weeks earlier. So every year I would ask for that for my birthday, and someone would give it to me. And then I would just like sit and read it from cover to cover like it was a novel or something.
You really are the perfect guest for the show.
And so, like, you know, and I read some of the ones that were standbys, because in that initial yearbook, people who bought the later yearbook know that, you know, that would only go back 2 or 3 years. The first several years of the annual book, there was a core of like just of reviews from the 60s, 70s, 80s that didn't go anywhere from year to year. And it wasn't until they turned it into the yearbook in like 2000 or like 99 that he did the paring away of everything up to a couple years earlier. So for those first few years of reading the yearbook, the movie home companion, I would read the same core reviews over and over again. So by the time
they were reprinted every year, right?
Yes, exactly. So by the time I saw Cuckoo's Nest, I knew Ebert's review like backwards and forwards. So I went into it with the flaws like already, you know, implanted.
You're like,
into
this
my
movie
brain.
has too many good scenes with Jack Nicholson.
No, but the specific Ebert complaint of the original review, if I recall correctly, was that the fatal flaw for the movie was the fishing boat scene.
Yep.
And that it took the whole movie out of the reality that it had established. It was a dramatic failure. It was a failure of imagination. You know, like it was, if I recall correctly, he really felt like this was an imperfect would-be masterpiece because of these couple of flaws in it.
Yes, I actually have that pulled up. I will read specifically that part. He didn't like the all-night orgy thing too, but specifically
right, because it was too clean. Yeah.
Yes. Another scene that just doesn't work because it's too heavily burdened with its purpose occurs when McMurphy escapes, commandeers a school bus, and takes all the inmates of the ward on a fishing trip in a stolen boat. The scene causes an almost embarrassing break in the movie. It's Forman's first serious misstep because it's an idolized fantasy in the midst of realism. By now, we've met the characters. We know them in the context of hospital politics. And when they're set down on the boat deck, they just don't belong there. The ward is the arena in which they'll win or lose. And it's not playing fair for them as characters to give them a fishing trip. It's kind of a weird thing to get hung up on. But I see where he's coming from. Like, it is jarring, but like in his great movies write-up, actually, that he wrote in 2003, I think he softened a little bit on that stuff.
Right, because the great movies piece, he did a couple of these where he sort of had to do a reconsideration of a movie that he had maybe been a little soft on previously. And that's honestly something I really like about him. Like that he never seemed so stubborn that he would like, you know, he couldn't revisit a movie and reappreciate it or have reset expectations.
It wasn't until my mid-20s that I just like I had like a realization that like you have to rewatch these fucking things.
Yeah, it's not a character flaw to change your mind about a movie.
100%. It's actually the right way to do it, I think. It's like it's like with great records, I feel the same way. The first time a really great record or a really great movie, it might not grab you at all. You might think it sucks. And like you really need to give yourself the grace of time and like growing to like watch it again or listen to it again and be like, oh yeah, I was, you know, you could even be like, I was going through X at the time and I didn't see why. Like it's just I appreciate them about him for sure.
Well, no, and that is one thing that you really also have to bear in mind. This had never occurred to me before we were just talking about it. You know, these were newspaper critics who were on a deadline. And like, I don't know about you, but when I'm covering a film festival, like there are films that I don't get to see in advance that I see for the first time with an audience, as they did apparently with this one at the Chicago Film Festival. But then like the movie ends and you have to walk out, go to a typewriter or a computer or whatever they're using at the time and write a review immediately, like a first impression. and file that for the world to see. Now, this is not like, Pauline Kael had my other favorite critic, but she had the luxury.
My other favorite critic too.
Yeah, she was writing for the New Yorker, so she was not on those kind of tight deadlines. And hell, sometimes she would wait to see a movie till it was out because she liked seeing them with audiences. So she could really formulate, in these long, sort of beautiful essays that she wrote, a really precise idea of how a movie had affected her and had some time to process it. These guys were having to do these immediate first reactions to movies that we now consider classics.
Yes.
That are now part of the canon. But in the moment, how would you know that? How could you feel that?
It's a serious burden, truly, like that I know you and I can relate to, because we are film critics that probably not a lot of people can relate to. But I will relay an example of, like, I saw at the Uncut Gems, for example, The Irishman, 2 movies that I would consider are going to be all-time classic movies, and that was the exact experience Jason just described.
Yeah.
We had to do their premiere. They screened them at, I think Irishman was like 8 a.m. one day.
Yep,
and then we had to leave. We had to leave and go write it because it's about to be live after the premiere. And there's something about I only harp on that to say it's remarkable that that Ebert is able to get such good reviews out of those type of experiences, because it makes me appreciate him as a writer. It's not an easy thing to do, and you're right that it does allow it, that helps give him space, I think, to come back to things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing,
these were newspaper men. That's the thing you got to remember. Both of these guys were old school, like trained in these newspaper men who did the job like it was a job, whose prose is kind of lean and mean, and who are working on a quick turnaround deadline. That aesthetic is very different from even the most prominent of film critics today.
Absolutely. Cinema sins is what we're talking about here. YouTube culture. I'm just kidding. I found the line in the Great Movies piece that I wanted to reference about him kind of at least trying to understand why that scene works now. I thought the quote would be more all-encompassing with that scene, but he basically says the part where they all pretend to be doctors when they're getting on the boat or whatever, because they have to pretend like they're not mental patients. He says this has nothing to do with mental illness and everything to do with comedy. So I feel like he softened on it, where he's like, yeah, the scene is supposed to be funny, so like, why am I grading it with like a fine-tooth comb and being like, this doesn't depict the things I want to see? But I do think if we're talking about Roger Ebert's review of this movie and take, and like, did he get it right versus, or not even versus, did he get it right and does his review hold up? I think both of those, I think the answer is yes to both, because he recognized that it was going to be popular. He said it was good, but he had qualms. But most importantly, I would say if you're criticizing this movie from a modern lens, the 2 biggest issues people would come up with, which I think are baked in and thematic and not really issues, and we can talk about it. Well, maybe it is an issue. The women problem in this movie. Like,
big time.
Women are treated as castrators, and like, again, that's what the book is about. I don't know if you've read the book. I actually, in my intense research when I was starting the show, I was like, every episode I have to watch and read everything.
Oh my god!
So, yeah, I mean, I quickly realized it's not going to be feasible. But I did read this book, and I thought it was fantastic. And I do want to talk about all the ways the movie is different, because I think it's interesting, but not like we have to go through itemize them. But a big part of the book is that all these men see women as castrators and like people to like be overcome, and that even factored into the casting process, as Lumet acknowledges that this was the beginning of like the women's empowerment movement, and all the actresses they wanted for Nurse Ratched turned it down. They don't list any of them, but they say Miloš and Michael Douglas, who's a producer on this movie, could not believe the talent that turned down this movie that they knew was going to be a hit and an Academy Award winning thing. So does this movie have it obviously doesn't have a reverence for powerful women, but like, does it disdain them, or like, what do you think about if someone called this film misogynist, would you say no, or would you say let's talk about it?
I would say let's talk about it, because I mean, that's what's great about a filmmaker like Forman is he's also not so sort of stringent in his approach that multiple readings aren't possible. I think that's a totally legitimate way to read the film. I think probably maybe more the way I feel, and arguably more accurate, is that it uses the way that this kind of man feels about women as a storytelling tool. And
Sure.
the idea that yes, he finds women, emasculating or castrating or whatever. But it's fundamentally an anti-establishment movie. And
Yes.
Nurse Ratched much more is standing in
Represents
for
that,
for the status quo than for anything particularly feminine. While it's also worth noting that that makes her being a woman makes that even more pointed. That's a way to make that kind of a villainy. But really, I think it's, and this is I know an argument you will revisit maybe on a per episode basis.
Yeah,
it does kind of come down to a question of depiction versus endorsement. And I think it's the kind of movie that is certainly about misogynists, but I don't think the film itself takes that perspective.
I agree with you. I think the ammo to say, well, Nurse Ratched is a big bad and her womanhood might not have anything to do with it. Then I think Ebert even points out the only other females in the movie that are treated nicely are the two hookers. And what does that mean?
Right. Yeah.
Which it's interesting. It's thorny. It's interesting. And you mentioned reading, so I wanted to throw this idea out there. I had in my notes, like someone on I had heard, that this movie was a movie in which Jack Nicholson plays a criminal who like weasels his way into a mental care facility and then is trapped there by the evil machine of the institution and Nurse Ratched. That is definitely a reading. And then there's another there's another reading you could do where McMurphy genuinely needs help and is not that different from the others in this care. And his narcissism and mania and delusions of grandeur are indications of mental illness. And I appreciate that the movie doesn't answer any of that shit. And you don't know if, like, is Nurse Ratched a true villain? Because she's always professional and reasonable and seems like that. Yes, she's spiteful when her authority is questioned, but does she mean well? Does she really want McMurphy to get better? Does she keep him because she wants him to get better? Or does she keep him because she's spitefully punishing him? And those are all amazing things to go home and talk about after a movie that the movie doesn't give you. And I think that is a part of its brilliance. And I do think the movie I don't know if it errs in changing a lot of the stuff from the book. I would just say, like, there's people who really hate this movie, who love the book, who think it removes the source material's anti-capitalism politics and dilutes it into like this vague anti-establishment thing, where Ken Kesey's book was very much like fuck America specifically.
Right.
And Miloš Forman, a guy who like is a proponent of the Czech New Wave movement, who like, moves to America in the 80s or whatever. Like, there's a part of it that's probably like, I don't think he feels this way about America, that Ken Kesey does feel this way about America. So he does soften those. Yeah, it does soften. The movie certainly softens a lot of the book, but I would argue it's the typical case of like a movie sanding down the edges to make something a movie and more commercially viable. One of the biggest changes is that Chief Bromden is like the lead in the book. He's the narrator, and like, he's the one telling the story, and you learn a lot about his background and his misogyny. I don't know if you want to call it misogyny, or his relationship with his mother, and like what everything means. It's just like you lose a lot in the movie by not having that structure, but like nothing that's lost in the translation. I don't know what I'm trying to say other than like, if you are interested in the themes of the movie, read the book and get more of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the movie, the book is very Ken Kesey, countercultural before the countercultural movement even started. Like it's just like setting the table for all this stuff. And the movie, it gets like the broad strokes of anti-establishment stuff, but it definitely like what Gene was talking about. There's incredible prose and description of like the he basically sees the institution as this machine that they're all trapped in, and they're all cogs in this
Right.
machine. And like the visual, I think that would have been an incredible visual metaphor, but that's something you can't do in a movie this movie was made very cheaply on a low budget.
Oh yeah.
So like that's like I understand basically I'm trying to say is I understand all the changes that were made, and I don't stand with the people who are like, I saw there's like, it's always fun to read like 1 to 1.5 star reviews on Letterboxd of shit that is iconic. Like a person who sees Jaws and gives it 1 star and goes like, 47 meters down much or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I don't agree that the movie is like this horrible bastardization of the book. I think it makes it it just makes it easier to digest for a general audience while also being, I think it still has the main theme of like being stuck in this society. Like, I think people don't make the leap that the book is very much saying this isn't about a mental institution. This is about our country at large.
Right. Which you can do in a novel.
Which you can do in a novel. And I would argue you can, and they did do in a movie. It's just one of those, like, you have to see the movie a few times and like understand what it's going for to really be like, I see this as a metaphor for the country.
Right.
It's not even that. It's not even that complicated. I don't think. I think it's all baked in, but it's not like on screen. If that makes sense. I don't know.
No, absolutely. And the thing to bear in mind too about that sort of journey to between the book and the film, which there were several years between them, was that in between it was a Broadway play.
Yes.
Which, from what I understand, having read literally none of them, but I have heard that really the movie is almost as much an adaptation of the play as it is of the original book. And then Kirk Douglas played McMurphy on stage and was trying for years to get a movie made and failed. And Michael Douglas sort of took the project over and became like a movie producer, improbably enough.
It's a really interesting conception of how this movie came to be, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, like, just film history stuff. It was the first film since It Happened One Night in 1934 to win
Big
all
five, baby.
Yeah, the big 5 of the top Oscars, which is Best Picture, Best Actor for Jack Nicholson, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, who I think even Ebert in his great movies points out, like, yes, she won an Oscar for this movie. Yes, it's still underrated. She is incredible in this movie.
Yes.
And that work is so good. It's so good. You're just watching it. You're just like, I'm not watching an actress. I'm watching Nurse Ratched. It really does feel that way. And I rarely feel that way. Director, Best Director, Miloš Forman, and Screenplay, Lawrence Hauben and Bo Goldman. Notably, I heard on the commentary, it was like the 3rd screenplay that had been written. The first one was written by Ken Kesey and was too much like a book and not thematic, apparently. Ebert points out in his great movies that the film is remembered as a comedy about the inmate revolt led by McMurphy and the fishing trip and the all-night orgy and his defiance of Nurse Ratched. But in fact, it is about McMurphy's defeat. One can call it a moral victory and rejoice in the chief's escape, but that is small consolation for McMurphy. So we can talk about the ending and what it means in a second. I'm just trying to go through my notes and find out interesting quotes. Lumet said, I thought this was great, that it's much more powerful for if Nurse Ratched or Jessica Fletcher isn't evil, but she's like an instrument of evil, and she doesn't even know she's evil. She's just like this matter of fact, I actually believe I'm helping people, soft, gentle, angelic, and that's what's scarier about her to him. And I think that's all very compelling. I would say the ending of the movie, it doesn't leave you feeling hopeful. I mean, I guess it does for like a second, where like you feel hopeful for one of the characters, but like McMurphy's is gone.
Toast.
He is toast. He is killed. His spirit is broken, and he is killed. And in the book, it's actually worse. Like, his spirit being broken is what kills another person. The guy, what's his name, Chisholm, or one of the guys who gets mad about the cigarettes. I forget what his name is, but he dies in the book because McMurphy, he like breaks, and he's like, his spirit is broken by that. So yeah, this movie, it's very Ken Kesey, like, saying like, this is what happens and if you live in this system, right? It's not going to work out for you.
But no, this is also very much your almost required, bummer 70s ending. Like so many of the great movies of the 70s, like one of the things that make them memorable is that they end on like a bummer down note. Like, and you can't imagine a movie today ending the way, that The Conversation does. Or the way that this one does, that idea of the good guys don't win,
Well, yeah, it's and the specific 70s countercultural society will destroy you. Bent. It runs through this movie for sure. We can move on the episode in just a second. I have random fun facts that are like just literal fun facts that I learned from the commentary and wrote down. There's the scene where Christopher Lloyd gets the cigarette butt like in the bottom of his pants and he like freaks out and runs around. That was only put in there because Miloš Forman literally had that happen to him at a bus stop. Someone threw a cigarette butt in his pants and it caught on fire and he was freaking out and no one knew what to make of it. So he put that in there, which I thought was great. Saul Zaentz, the producer, Saul Zaentz. Zaentz. Famously not a good guy, right? Like I feel like there's a Tom Petty song about him being a piece of
shit. There was a whole big dispute, years-long dispute between him and John Fogerty, which is John Fogerty. That's it. The main thing I know him from. But yeah, I mean, like literally, yes, wrote songs about how Saul Zaentz is a crook. Yes,
incredible. But Saul Zaentz produced it, and he was saying, Cuckoo is like what made Jack a popular known entity. So much so that while they were filming it, people would come up and hound producer Michael Douglas for autographs, but not say anything to Jack, which I thought was a hilarious. Wow. I imagine Jack getting really annoyed by that, even though he wasn't hot shit yet. Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando, both turned down the role.
Wow.
Yeah, would have been.
Those would have been interesting.
Those both would have been interesting. Like I have no oh no, it had to be Nicholson. Like any of those three would have been fine.
Yeah,
those are three incredible actors. So I would say Ebert kind of nailed it. And most interestingly, the things that we're calling out as problematic, like the women treatment and we haven't even talked about the treatment of people with mental illness, is another thing that people rag on this movie for. I would say this movie holds up, and I would say Ebert's take on this movie holds up specifically because in his contemporary 75 review, he mentions those things. And that's something that people talk about today and they would talk about today and do talk about today. So Ebert, you came out unscathed on this one. You really nailed it. Let's keep watching the episode. I think there's some weird animated short we get to watch now.
There's a lot of that.
So we'll let this episode play, I think, because I think they're going to talk about other stuff before we get to Dog Day. I just want to say we will talk about all the things talked about in the Patreon episode we're going to record it right after this. It's going to basically be the continuation of the same episode, but we're going to stop after Dog Day and talk about Dog Day. Here is the rest of Opening Soon at a Theater Near You.
And this was like a short that played at the Chicago Film Festival, right? Was that it?
Yes. Sorry if I cut off the intro. I think they'll talk about it after.
Yeah. Again, just kind of a strange thing to do with your airtime.
Strange thing to do, yeah.
Show an animated short.
Yeah, it's an animated short from the festival.
Yep. Nope, that was not the end of the clip, folks. Natural stopping point, but nope.
Oh, the irony of that shot right there. This is like MST3K style. I'm having fun.
Yes.
This is great.
Yeah,
this was a great idea for a podcast.
Well, Roger, what do you think of the short film here from the Chicago Film Festival? I mean, it was public television, folks. They had a lot of time to film. They spent 8 hours taping this thing, and apparently 5 of them watching clips. fun thing to think about with this episode is to wonder how many people actually saw it when it originally aired.
Who actually what? Sorry.
Actually saw it when it originally aired. I wonder.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
I mean, like
fascinated.
by this point, like they're down to like 12 viewers by this point in this animated short clip.
Oh yeah. If they had those metrics we have today, where you can see how many eyes are on the page at a
disappearing,
time, it would be hilarious for sure.
Oh God.
All right.
Hey, they're back.
I love them watching this stuff.
Self-service. I should mention that was just a short segment of a film that was about 10 minutes long, and it won the festival's Golden Hugo as the best piece of animation in this year's Chicago Film Festival. A good one from a new animator nobody ever heard of before.
He did another good one called Opera, which really spoofed all kinds of operas. And I guess based on these two films, he's got a contract now to do a feature-length cartoon.
Feature-length animation, which should be something to look forward to.
I like these animated films because they're always
real worked up about it.
Going to happen. Animated characters can do anything, I guess, but the live-action stuff that we see with real people, half the time it's over before it starts. We know what's going to happen.
It's exhilarating in a cartoon because the animator has total control over time and space, and so whatever his fantasies are, he can realize them, at least within that format.
There were some other prize winners at the festival, too.
Right. This year's festival was won by a film by Andrzej Wajda called Land of Promise. It was a Polish epic about Poland's transition to an industrial state. And there was a certain amount of controversy on the jury, Gene. It was a 5-3 vote. A lot of people liked Land of Promise because it was a sort of Gone with the Wind sort of epic that was a traditionally well-made film. On the other hand, the so-called Special Jury Award, which is kind of a special second prize, went to Fist, Right of Freedom by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, one of the new generation of West German directors. And I think the minority on the jury, and I must say I was part of it, felt that this new kind of cinema from Germany, kind of a
name drop,
terrifically melodramatic subject handled in an almost outrageously banal way, if I may say so, deserved a little more encouragement than the more traditional film.
I thought even better than his direction was his performance. He was a leading character in the film. A homosexual gets involved in a rough crowd and gets destroyed.
These are two movies I didn't watch for this episode, and I'm going to self-flagellate later.
Well.
This is his fourth film on the Chicago Film Festival and his third Hugo, even though he hasn't ever won the first prize.
The festival's over now, and we're waiting for a lot of Christmas films to
We're just trading information here.
Of all the things that we should get is a family film. We don't get many family films any time during the year. It's sort of strange to have one now. It's a film called Quilp, Mr. Quilp. Anthony Newley stars.
I wouldn't call this a family film. I watched this. We'll talk about it on the Patreon.
He's a man who's a wicked moneylender, and because he's the star of the film, he gets to show us just how evil he is in a title tune.
It's a Dickens play.
Quilp, you can call me Daniel, scruffier than a spaniel, slippery as an eel, the real McQuilp of fame, as cunning as a weasel. Every little breeze will whisper my name, here in my home, from home, by the rat-infested river. I deliver smuggled wares, have a hot Havana. Here I dine alone on a load of rum and kippers, cheating on myself at solitaire. King of Hearts is Mr. Dan. Dan, Quilpish to the backbone, stab you in the backbone, stinkier than a skunk, the smallest hunk of crime since Borgia did her grooming. And though to err is human, to Quilp is divine. So if by some odd fluke you're looking for a villain, stoop a little over and you're looking at a rill, and I'm Dirty Dan, the bottom of the barrel. If it's nasty and immoral, it's Quilp.
Anthony Newley as Mr. Quilp. It's a G-rated film. It's in neighborhood theaters now, or it's in the Chicago area now, I should say. It's based on Dickens' The Old Curiosity Shop. Maybe this is kind of a tradition, Gene, at Christmas time, a movie based on Dickens. We had Oliver, the musical. We had Scrooge, based on A Christmas Carol.
Albert Finney in that one.
Right.
We rarely get family films. The filmmakers always say that parents talk about taking their kids to films, so that they rarely go with them, especially during the week, Monday through Thursday, these films die, and it's only a little bit of a weekend business, and then the parents really don't go.
Another thing that is probably the case is that if a Disney film opens, and we're not putting the Disney organization down, but people know, well, it's a Walt Disney film, it's got to be okay, I'll send the kids. Anything else they're not so sure about. And so some of the more inventive films, in addition to the ones I'd mentioned, I'd also had Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from about 4 years ago get overlooked in the shuffle, while fairly routine Disney
From about 4 years ago.
Yeah, I paused just to say, what a, like, the Disney thing. I'm just struck by, like, he just said, you know, Disney's a sign of quality, and, like, don't people only go see Disney stuff? And I'm like, we're living in 2022, and that is only more true because Disney owns everything. Yeah.
Disney and Minions. Come on now.
That's right. I forgot about the fact that there are there's room for more animation than Disney now, as long as it's Minions. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Really want to make sure that their kids aren't insulted by the film or have gross language in it. And I think that they're not aware of what the kids really want to see. The kids don't want to see the fluff. I'm sure the calls you get and the letters you get, kids want to see the same films their parents see. And they also, one other kind of film I know they like an awful lot are horror films.
They like horror films, and they like Jaws, too. One of the reasons that Jaws is the biggest hit that Hollywood has ever had is because kids like to see it. Some of them even identified with the shark.
Jaws had come out like 3 months before this or something.
Another movie that's playing in Chicago right now is Conduct Unbecoming.
There is Chicago.
British melodrama, lots of great British character actors, lots of spit and polish. Not a very good movie.
It's set in 1890.
I thought it was good. We'll talk about it on the Patreon. Conduct Unbecoming.
And underneath the helmets is a heart of evil, a head of evil maybe under the helmet. And it's a film that you and I didn't care for. I think people are expecting us to disagree a lot. Not on this film. In the film,
there it is.
There's a scene in which Susanna York gets into some trouble.
Right, Susanna York. She plays the colonel's widow. They have a big drunken dance in the officers' mess. She wanders out into the garden. She's attacked in the gazebo. She staggers back to the party with her dress all torn apart. And
all of that in this scene.
Mikey, what happened?
Gotta take the brandy. Take this is all quickly. Watch. Let's get her into the mess. What's happening here? She's been attacked. Come with me. It's all right, Marge. It's all right. Get about it. What on earth has happened there?
She's been attacked, Doctor.
Let me see it, yeah? Is that true? You were attacked?
Yes.
Well, who by? Who was it? Marjorie. Someone attacked you. Must tell us who it was.
the great accusation scene, and let it not be said that melodrama is dead. Needless to say, and I hope I'm not giving away too much of the movie for anyone who intends to see it, the person they think did it didn't do it, although the process by which we arrive at the criminal is a very torturous one and very unbelievable.
You shouldn't give away anything for a movie.
Not even that?
No,
nobody will ever guess who did it in this one.
No, the Easter Bunny could have walked in. The guy that they pick or the woman that they pick, how's that for confusing people? Unbelievable. And the motivations, cornball Freud. I mean, it's really a
Cornball Freud.
100 minutes to find out who's guilty. The payoff better be good. And in this
it's a good band name, Cornball Freud.
Even that scene, what was wrong
yeah, I'm writing that one down for sure.
That pan across of those faces and the distorted kind of faces, that's such an old, hackneyed way of making a movie. It's more like a film play, which is what this thing really is.
It's definitely more like a film play, but it's okay.
It's sort of a Victorian Perry Mason did a trial scene. It's a summary court-martial at midnight, unofficial. The commanding officer isn't supposed to know about it. Stacy Keach is in the chair. Michael York is chosen against
Great
his will
performers
to
in this
defend the
movie.
accused man. And in this clip,
Mhm.
we see
Hell of a
Michael
cast.
York, a young officer, trying to get at the truth.
Did you pick up a stone, perhaps?
No, I don't think so.
Or a branch from a tree?
No.
If you please, Mom, I think Mr. Drake is referring to...
I am referring to the injury sustained by Mr. Billington. A deep gash some 2 inches long behind his right ear.
Yes. Yes, of course.
My God, it's
I do
Basil
remember now.
Exposition.
It was a stone.
I don't think so, Mom. I searched the area around the folly for an hour this evening, and there was not a stone to be found for 100 yards in any direction.
It may have been wood, a branch.
No, ma'am. Not a stick nor a stone anywhere. Nothing with which you could possibly have struck Mr. Millington.
Really, this is quite absurd, Mr. President.
It is indeed, Mom. Mr. Drake, it's perfectly obvious that when Mrs. Scarlett broke away from Mr. Millington, he fell against a tree or a wall.
No, I didn't.
Silence, sir.
I was hit.
Be quiet, please.
Of course. If you wish to take his word against mine.
Certainly not, Mom. Mr. Drake, this has gone far enough.
I'm sorry, sir. I was mistaken.
Though I can't recommend the film, I must say I did get a kick out of seeing the actors try to survive some really arch dialogue. Stacy Keach and Michael York do a valiant job.
They're being very mean to a movie that's like
That's one thing I think
perfectly
we should make clear in
fine.
case anybody
It's
wants to
competent.
see it.
Right.
It's not.
boring.
It's not
These are
great.
good British actors,
but
and
it's
they
okay.
really
I've
know
thought-
how to be hokey.
I've thought on this.
Sometimes they're at their
Okay.
best when they're chewing the scenery. Trevor Howard, in particular, is famous for that. One of the things that we're going to do on the show from time to time is talk to you about what's already in the neighborhoods, what's opened up, what's playing perhaps near you. And the first one we want to review today is Gene's task, Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah, these will be things that we can really recommend, and I can't recommend strongly enough. Dog Day Afternoon, Al Pacino gives a terrific performance. He'll be nominated, that's for sure, for an Academy Award. He plays a failed bank robber, a sort of a weird guy who tries to hustle.
Sort of a weird guy.
To support a sex change operation for his boyfriend.
That was
Big
some
stars don't like
improv
to take
from
risks
Gene.
like that in the role, but
Mhm.
Pacino's terrific. And when he's out on the street doing weird things that you wouldn't normally believe, he does them with so much energy that I had to sort of suspend belief and really got into the picture. I liked it.
One of the funny things about the picture is that, and of course, truth is stranger than fiction. It's based on a magazine article from New York Magazine. This robbery really
Nope,
did take
from
place,
Life
as much as it's
magazine,
shown in the
actually.
film.
I get to
Ooh.
correct. I get to
Ooh.
correct Roger on that one.
We're not gonna disagree on this. It's Hearts of the West. It's a beautiful little.
We should really get down to hammer and tongs on something, but I did like Hearts of the West. It's a nice film. It's set in 1930 in Hollywood, where they're making grade B, $1.98, terrible westerns. And Jeff Bridges plays a young man who accidentally is picked up in the desert by a movie posse. He's taken into town and becomes a star, falls in love with the script girl, runs awry with a terrible producer played by Alan Arkin. And it's a kind of a pleasant, low-key, it's a nice comedy.
It's a film you really want to like. And unless I'm wrong, I think that there's either a dog out here in the theater or it's time for our favorite feature, Dog of the Month.
Dog of the Month. Yeah, what's the dog?
Love Dog of the Month. Just pausing to say we will be talking about Hearts of the West on the Patreon, and I just pausing because Jason and I both watched it today or over the weekend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I loved it. Loved it.
Holy
blown
shit.
away.
Holy shit.
And
Yeah.
and it actually ends up being a perfect thematic double feature with Nope, which we covered on Friday, last Friday. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. But it covers the same. It's about Nope is about movies, people making movies in the desert and like paying respect to the below the line people. And that is exactly what this movie's about from 1975. So it was really a trip to see that. I know Jason wanted to say something about the way they talked about Conduct Unbecoming, but I'm assuming that's Patreon fodder. Or you want to talk about it?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, there's a sort of big idea that comes to me a lot while I'm watching old movie review stuff, but we'll get into it because it has to do with
Great.
that conversation.
Perfect. Love it. Good tease. Here's the
Thanks.
rest of the episode here, and then we're gonna get into Dog Day Afternoon, and then we're gonna end this. We're gonna put this puppy out of its misery. All right, here we go.
Well, my Dog of the Month would have to be Lisztomania. It's a rotten picture. Ken Russell is
Boo.
the director. He is the guy who goes throughout in Tommy, and now he's trying to outdo himself. I don't know why he would want to do that. He destroys the career of Liszt and also of Wagner. This is the same Ken Russell who made a great series of documentaries for British television. And that beautiful film called Woman in Love. Now he seems to try to play up to the rock audience, and just by grossing the audience out. I didn't like it at all.
I really couldn't disagree with you more. I think I gave it 3 stars in the same times. I'm not a Ken Russell fan, but I did like Tommy, and I did like this because I felt that at last he had cut away from his desire to kind of make a halfway respectable film, and he had become inspired in his madness.
Yeah, but he had.
I love in these early episodes when they throw their newspaper ratings at each other.
Respectable films. This is trash.
On the other hand, I think that this was the first of the second film in a long time that wasn't trash. So we disagree. Can I go on to My Dog, which is another film?
It's such an awkward segue.
It's a big soap opera. It's got all the dramatic cliches of the 40s and 50s, only now the characters are black instead of white. And so I guess I was supposed to say, well, that's really progress, but I don't think it is. Diana Ross plays a fashion designer from Chicago. She falls in love with Billy D. Williams, who is sort of a Jesse Jackson type. And she goes off to Paris with Anthony Perkins, which is a mistake, goes to Rome, I should say. It's a mistake to go anywhere with Anthony Perkins in most of the movies that he's in. And I didn't like it. I felt there wasn't an original moment in it from beginning to end.
What did he say this movie was called? I didn't even see.
This is Mahogany.
Okay. This is
I've seen
Mahogany.
this.
I haven't seen Mahogany.
We can talk about it.
Thank God you're picking up my slack. Right. I thought I watched all the movies. They keep mentioning movies. I didn't remember.
It didn't make it any better for me. It's an old-fashioned film.
The only thing I liked was that it was shot in Chicago, and our city always looks great, and we ought to get more films made here.
I said it was old-fashioned. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. One of the things we want to talk about is a series that's coming up at the Biograph Theater on Lincoln Avenue, and it's not just another revival series. They've got a package of 40 MGM classics. These are new prints made from the master negative.
Very early, very local. This is only Chicago public television at this point.
Oh, hell yeah.
Singing in the Rain or Grand Hotel, Mutiny on the Bounty. It looks as if they've been dragged down the street before they were shown in the theater. It's nice to see them in a new print.
If you've seen them on television, it's not the same as seeing them this way. These are...
For the record, this sounds like a great retro, and I would go to a bunch of these.
The thing you can do, I guess, is go by the theater and pick up a schedule. They're going to have movies like Captain's Courageous, Tarzan of the Apes, Camille with Garbo. The Christmas double feature is The Wizard of Oz and Meet Me in St. Louis.
It's certainly worth seeing, and that's what's opening for us all at a theater near you.
Look at those credits.
That's right. Now Siskel got the top writing credit.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Maybe that was a bargain that was struck for billing, who would get top billing as quote unquote actors and who as writers. One thing I always mean to mention whenever I talk about especially these older shows, the 70s ones, these are like, I will periodically go through phases where I'm watching them again, and then suddenly I'll start using pictures in both conversation and in my writing as a synonym for movies. Like there was one moment in the clip we just heard where Gene ended a sentence by referring to a picture, and then Roger Ebert is immediately like, another picture that's that, and it's just like it's infectious. Out.
Yeah,
it is, but it is infectious for such a long time. The only person I saw who was still alive in interviews and calling them pictures was Peter Bogdanovich. So forever, I just assumed anyone who used pictures in conversation was just like, Peter Bogdanovich level. But they throw it around all the time, which I think is interesting, especially Gene. Gene loves calling him pictures.
We're gonna have to do like a running tally every episode of how many times they say picture. Maybe that's a running feature we're gonna start. So I was struck by how little they said about Dog Day Afternoon, first of all. Because they didn't say anything about it, really. They just recommended it, said it's good. Right. We'll get into it for a little bit here. I just want to mention that it's accidentally a perfect pairing for a few reasons. Mostly because we're amid a historic heat wave right now, and it's a perfect afternoon any afternoon lately is a perfect one to watch this. Another reason it's a happy accident. It's the 50th anniversary of the crime, a literal exact month from today. The 50-year anniversary of the crime, which means the movie came out, 3 years after that? So that's a happy accident. But as I mentioned earlier with Hearts of the West being an accidentally good double feature, this is accidentally a good double feature with Nope as well. Because Nope is a movie about spectacle, and this movie is about the first ever media circus, which is very much about spectacle and like how spectacle became a part of American life. So Nope is about like the impact of these events and how we live in a media first world. And this movie is about how that came to be, kind of. So I'm not even making stretches here. These are actually good connections. I promise you. All right. So Dog Day Afternoon. I didn't say this up top, and I should have. Jason is a film critic and a writer and an incredible author. In his most recent book, is, I believe, I hope I don't butcher it, Fun City Cinema.
Fun City Cinema, New York, and the movies that made it.
Boom, there it is. It's out there now. You can buy this book wherever books are sold. And I'm assuming for that book you had to watch this movie a few times. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Oh, I sure did. Yeah. Well, I mean, the premise of the book, it's a 100-year dual history of New York City and New York City movies. And the structure that we use is that each chapter covers a decade in New York City history and then chooses as its focus one sort of quintessential New York movie of that decade. And so in many ways, the hardest part of writing the damn thing was just picking the movie for each decade when you can only pick one.
That's so hard. Yeah.
And I got the decade it's hardest in is the 1970s. Like that's when all of that's Taxi Driver, that's, you know, Dog Day Afternoon, that's French Connection, that's Pelham 1 2 3, that's, you know, all of the sort of grimy New York movies when you think of that era are just like, you know, a bunch of masterpieces. So one of the things I do in the book is we focus on the one, but then at the end of each chapter there's a series of standalone essays. It's the now playing section where there's an essay on several more films from that decade. And so Dog Day Afternoon is not the chapter choice for the 70s, although it was very close, but the chapter choice is Taxi Driver. Dog Day Afternoon has one of the standalone essays at the end of that chapter, and it was a fun movie to dig into and do research on, and you know, a messy story to begin with that was sort of fictionalized in ways that some folks didn't care for, and then there's this whole long tail of the movie where, like, for years afterwards, the profits from it were disputed. Because there was a charge of, like, you know, that's making money off of this tragedy, or then, you know, the guy who played the character who's known as Sonny in the movie, he wanted some of that money, and there was
it's like, I'm trying to think of a modern example. I think like Anna Delvey, if you watch that fucking Netflix show or whatever, she got into trouble because she was selling her life rights for money when she was her life rights are just crimes she committed.
Just all the crime. And
yeah.
So, but yes, it's a wonderful New York movie. It's a wonderful New York in the summer movie. That terrific montage right at the beginning, which if you haven't read Sidney Lumet's book Making Movies, it's just like an indispensable. It's just one of the best books ever written about making movies. And he talks about how to get that opening montage, they just took a camera out in the streets of Brooklyn, like on an afternoon, and stole all of those shots.
Yes. My wife was watching it on the couch with me today during the commentary, and I was like, put your head up right now and look at this. Like, he's just talking about how they stole all these shots of New Yorkers,
all of them.
Like all of them. And that's something that would just never happen today. Like, even I feel like John Wilson, which you think is a show, I don't know if you watch it, but it looks like a show where they're stealing footage, but you know there's people chasing after everybody with release papers. And like, that's something that did not happen here. Yeah.
No, you know, and it's a brilliant way to establish, you know, the sort of verisimilitude of the entire thing, because he writes at length in the book about how it was such for its time, and I even for today, of a sensational story, that the sexual and gender politics that are happening in the movie are so potent. That he said right away, that Lumet knew instinctively right away that there couldn't be any artificiality to the film or to their performances, so that they had to do this opening in this sort of cinema verite style, so it felt grounded in a reality. He told Pacino and Casal and Charles Durning and the whole cast, he said, don't give me any artifice. You're not going to wear costumes. I want you to wear your own clothes.
To the point of
yourselves.
Exactly. I was gonna say, to the point of those actors were not like, and Lumet says he's never read the article about the robbery. He's never watched the footage because he's never wanted to, like, I think maybe I misstated that. He's never watched the footage because he doesn't want anyone to, like, be doing someone else's performance. As you said, he wanted Al Pacino to be just like, do what Al Pacino would do what Charles Durning would do. Everyone just be yourself. This is a movie that really happened. He kept saying on the commentary, this movie really happened. So like everything has to be real, no artifice, as you said. And that, if you notice, the only music in the movie is that Elton John opening montage music. And that's
which is revealed to be diegetic because they're listening to it, and it's on the coming out of the car radio when they pull up to the bank.
Yes,
and that's how he like one of my favorite flips of that ever.
I do love that. Like he said, like, you know, there was a cut with music, and then they took it out and put it back in, and it just wouldn't work. He's like, no, we have to do that. And then the whole movie, if you watch the commentary, he stops and says, "Imagine what would happen if we had music in this scene. It would have ruined it." He keeps saying that. It's so funny. It is truly incredible. I'm always going to advocate for buying physical media, but the Blu-ray for Dog Day, really great commentary. I'm sure the book has all that stuff too. Because what you're saying, I'm like nodding my head, like, oh yes, I just heard this too. Yeah.
Yes, but I think the in terms of personally, I think it's a great New York movie. I think it's a great American movie. I think it's one of the best films of the 70s. I think Pacino's work in it is like unparalleled. It's still an astonishing performance. The things Cazale is doing are amazing. And it's also a film that
improvising Wyoming. The line Wyoming was improv.
Yes.
Incredible.
Oh my God. But it's also a film, again, like I feel very lucky to be the guest on the show because it's a film I've always had an extremely personal connection with. Because I did the thing a few years ago, some stupid prompt that was going around Twitter where they were like, look up the #1 movie at the box office the week you were born. And I was born in November of 75. Dog Day Afternoon was the #1 movie in the country on the day I was born. So I feel extremely connected to this movie about freaks and weirdos in New York. I feel very connected.
I'm very glad you're here as well. I'm glad we started talking about the sexual, politics, whatever you want to call it, the inclusion of a transgender character, and the fact that like it's kind of the selling point behind like, look at how crazy and outrageous this is.
Right.
And so
sort of a weird guy.
He keeps saying that. He keeps saying Lumet keeps saying like he's a weird guy. This is so outrageous. So the subject matter itself is so outrageous. Lumet says, and I'm not going to correct him. I'm sure he's pretty right that this is maybe the first discussion in a major movie about that includes a transsexual character. But so Sonny's doing this bank robbery to get his male lover a sex change operation, and Sidney Lumet said he was very, very concerned that people would react defensively because people react so defensively around sexual subjects. He thought that they would laugh in the wrong places. So for him, the final scene where he makes the will for all the money he's got, that reading of the will scene is the most moving moment to him. And I believe it is the most moving moment to everybody who watches it because it works. Yeah. And he said, like, thank God that worked because I want it to be taken seriously. And he said, I would imagine the worst vision he had was like, showing that scene and people being like, hey, look at that fag over there. And like, he feared audiences would react that way. So I want to give Lumet credit. This is, I guess we're talking about, does this movie hold up? Does Ebert's take hold up? Does the movie hold up? Yes, it does 100%. Does the transgender politics stuff hold up? I would say by the inherent inclusion. I lost you. I lost Jason. Lumet keeps calling the transgender individual an extremely strange person. And they keep saying, the movie's about, I want to make sure this isn't a freak show. It's very important to me and our guiding principle and everything. The freaks are not the freaks we think they are. We all have more in common. They have more in common with us than we think. The movie's about finding this common path of empathizing and understanding with anybody. It's about shared humanity. And then in the same sentence, or like a sentence later, he'll be like, a man who wants to have women's sex organs in his body is not an everyday normal guy. And that to me is like where I'm like, ooh, like you're so well-intentioned and you want to be like, yeah, I'm putting transgender people in my movie. Deal with it. This is real life. But like, I have to give him credit for including it and having the conversation, even if he definitely had the views on transgender people of a person from 1975. You know what I mean? It definitely reflects the time. And like, I would say you could I would say if I were a guy in 75 having this podcast and I was like contemporarily reviewing it, I think I would say it was progressive and ahead of its time.
Oh, totally.
Simply
totally.
for treating it with humanity, right?
Yes, exactly. You know, the idea of, you know, change in social attitudes and perspectives is always going to be incremental, you know. So like at one point in time, we have trans characters, but they're not treated like freak shows, is extremely progressive because, you know, 20 years before that, it was, you know, transvest, you know, look at the transvestites, look at the weirdo transvestites. Yeah. So the idea, you know, and then 20 years later, you know, today's progression is 20 years from now's cringe. And you're going to run into that a lot as you're watching, you know, the 70s is an incredible era for cinema where also, you know, a lot of the sort of checks and balances that we're trying to get into place in terms of representation and inclusion across the spectrum, we're just not there, where it was just mostly white dudes making movies, and the movies reflected primarily the experience of a white dude.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the mistake that is too often made when we're having these conversations is to sort of indict those who were lucky enough to get through instead of indicting a system that only let them through. And a real tendency to like throw out great movies like you throw out the baby with the bathwater just because like, well, there's, you know, this is all movies were at that point, you know?
Yeah. One thing that I learned from the commentary that I'm sure is all over the book is how much improvisation is all over this movie. Like it has more improv than a Judd Apatow movie. It is unbelievable. I'm surprised there's no Line-O-Rama feature on the DVD. There's so much improv. Apparently Al completely improvised the famous Attica scene where he's just yelling Attica and like getting the crowd excited. Like that was just like natural and they weren't supposed to do that. And that fed him and then he went crazy and they went crazy. So like all that type of stuff, like when you're watching the commentary, you're just like, this movie was just like a analog, amazing experience of like, they were just shooting this. They built a set of the bank so they could come out to the street, so they could film it. They could film it for real, like in the street, in the bank, and going in and out. It wasn't fake. Like all of that makes it so this movie has stood the test of time and is an iconic movie. And like, yes, it's this movie about a bank robbery, but actually it's more about criminals becoming celebrities and like how that is a thing we're going to have to deal with now in society. And like, it's kind of pathetic in that way.
I also think it's intensely relatable just as a movie that's about being under pressure. Like, there's so many great images, and I've seen some of them like as GIFs of Al Pacino just like head in hands, you know, just great movies of like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders.
A masterclass.
That level of performance is, I think, really admirable.
Yeah, it's definitely a masterclass in being stressed out. And I just have to point out, has any criminal ever gotten away by asking the police for a plane? Like, has that ever worked out? It's so frustrating to watch. Just like, oh, you dumb motherfucker. Like, you are not, you're not getting out of this, dude. I'm so sorry. But if you don't know what Attica was, Lumet gave like a 1-sentence description that helps contextualize it. And I'm sure
if anyone would like, if anyone would like further context, this is serious, actually. My very good friend and my producing partner, Mike Hull, who produces and edits my Fun City Cinema podcast and is on it occasionally as a co-host, is a documentary filmmaker. He made an incredible documentary about the Attica riot / uprising, which is called Betrayal at Attica. It's on HBO Max right now. It's very recent. It just came out for the 50th anniversary. But cue that up. I was in the extremely uncomfortable position of not being able to review one of my favorite documentaries of last year. Because
that's a bummer. But good for your buddy. That's great.
Yeah, it's a really, really fine film. It's on HBO Max, and it's called Betrayal at Attica. And it'll give you all the background on that context, because what's fascinating about watching a movie from an era is that they didn't have to have some bullshit explainer. They didn't have to have some guy in the audience for another say, he's talking about the recent Attica prison uprising, but like
Correct.
everyone knew what Attica was in reference to.
I'm trying to think of a modern thing. Like if it would be like if a movie referenced Kim Kardashian or something, like somebody we all know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was like shorthand. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
And if you don't know what it is, it's an infamous moment in New York Correctional Institution history when a prison riot broke out, and after like days, Governor Rockefeller ordered the National Guard in, and 19 prisoners were shot and killed, and no officers were killed. And one of the horrors there was that all the prisoners were shot in the back. Infamous riots that was like a black mark on cops, which has borne out pretty well over the ages. Other stuff is just kind of trivial fun facts that I have. I do want to, of course, I got to read the Roger reviews because he didn't talk about the movie at fucking all on the episode. So I feel obligated to read it a little bit. But the Screen Actors Guild, this is so interesting to me. There's something called the Screen Extras Guild in LA. This is how it worked at the time. The Screen Extras Guild in LA versus having extras in New York where they're actually just in the Screen Actors Guild. So in LA, if you're a director and you're directing extras, you're not allowed to interact with them. If you interact with an extra as a director, it automatically bumps them up to a bit part and they get a bigger salary. So in New York, they were all actors and they could be treated as such. So Sidney Lumet, for like the crowd outside, had 300 actors, not 300 extras. So this means he could direct them and interact with them. I thought it was so funny. He's like, I love filming this in New York. I hate filming in LA with the fucking Extras Guild. It's so ridiculous. Lumet says the movie is simply following the truth of what happened, tells us the truth about the way we live. People are so used to a TV being a part of their lives. It's normal. It's the first real incident of a media circus around an ongoing horrific event. And he said, this is the line that made me laugh. He said he laughs at the idea of reality television because you put a camera in a room, how real is it? It's fake from beginning to end. It's all an artificial creation. And I thought that was really interesting.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. Fun fact about the JFK shooting at the end, or footage, I mean, not shooting. Shooting the footage at JFK is because...
this movie ends with the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. It's real weird. They just cut to the Zapruder film. It's very strange.
Sidney Lumet says, thank God I knew Senator Javits. That's the only reason they shot the movie at JFK is because they had a senator sneak them in there and they had to complete it in one night. The Dog Day Afternoon filmmakers arranged for the guy who it's depicting, was it Sonny, whose name wasn't really Sonny, who was imprisoned at the time, to receive $7,500 plus 1% of the film's profits. He later sued Warner Brothers and earned an additional $100,000, and that money was used for his wife's sex change operation. So the mission which had first inspired his twisted quest was he got what he wanted because the movie came out.
Because of the movie. That's
so interesting. That's just interesting.
That's great.
But regardless of the personal triumph, the couple split and she died of AIDS in 1987 at 41, very sadly.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's brutal. So this is pretty much the end of this episode. We've been talking for it's an hour 40 minutes or so. So I am trying to find a portion of the review to read out. I mean, because we've got a contemporary 75 review and we've got a 2008 Dog Day review. Do these stand out to you as compelling Roger reads? I don't remember.
They're not ones that jump out in my memory, but I do remember, that he gives it 4 stars, right?
He gave it 3.5 in
3.5. The Roger 3.5. Yeah,
the Roger 3.5, and then he updated it. He gave it 4 stars as a great movie. It's actually not that long, so I'll just read the Dog Day Afternoon contemporary review, and I will just point out that does it make more sense to read his 2008 review? I don't know what to do here.
No, I'm always more interested in the initial reaction. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, I love the Great Movies essays and have all the books, but I think it's more interesting to know what the first reaction is.
For sure. So this episode will end right after I read this review that is dated. I'm sure the date is probably wrong because it says January 175. And I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah, no. When the Sun Times put in a lot of the earlier reviews,
assuming that,
they just dated into the first day of the year. But yeah, it would have run in 75 fall.
So Dog Day Afternoon 75, Roger Ebert's review. There's a point midway in Dog Day Afternoon when a bank's head teller, held hostage by two very nervous stick-up men, is out in the streets with a chance to escape. The cops tell her to run, but no, she goes back inside the bank with the other tellers, proudly explaining, "My place is with my girls." What she means is her place is at the center of live TV coverage inspired by the robbery. She's enjoying it. This is so fucking good already. This is a great review of the movie.
Well, I know, because it's one of the big tricks that I learned from him as a writer of a full-length movie review is a lot of times if you don't know where to start, if you're trying not to start with the traditional sort of like thesis statement,
This
the big
movie's-
idea of the... Yeah. If you want a sort of a, that's either the conventional walk into the review, the front door is typically either that, the new, Dog Day Afternoon, the new Sidney Lumet picture is a da-da-da-da-da. Or, you come in with like the plot description, Sonny, Al Pacino, like you come right in with that. Occasionally he will do this thing, which if those are the front and the back door, he'll come in through the window where he will it's almost like an in media res where he the first graph of the review is either a line of dialogue out of context or a really detailed description of a scene sort of from the middle of the movie and you don't know what it means yet. It's a really effective device for grabbing a reader. That newspaper man's instinct.
Yeah, I wish I had flagged this book better because there's a quote in the book where he specifically talks about that and how he doesn't like if I don't know how to start a review, I will just write about like start describing a scene from it and then go from there. And obviously he's writing it in his beautiful prose and it's incredible. But I'm paraphrasing. Criminals become celebrities because their crimes provide fodder for the media. Many of the fashionable new crimes, hijacking, taking hostages, are committed primarily as publicity stunts. And a complex relationship grows up among the criminals, their victims, the police, and the press. Knowing they're on TV, hostages comb their hair, and killers say the things they've learned on the evening news. That's the subject, in a way, of Sidney Lumet's pointed film. It's based on an actual bank robbery that took place in New York in the 70s, and it seems to borrow, too, from the curious episode in Stockholm when hostages barricaded in a bank vault with would-be robbers began to identify with their captors. The presence of reporters and the live TV cameras changed the nature of those events, helped to dictate them, made them into happenings with their own internal logic. But Lumet's film is also a study of a fascinating character. Sonny, the bank robber who takes charge, played by Al Pacino, is a compulsive and most complex man. He's street smart, he fought in Vietnam, he's running the stick up in order to get money for his homosexual lover to have a sex change operation. He's also married to a chubby and shrill woman with 3 kids. He has a terrifically possessive mother. The Freudianism gets a little thick at times. Sonny isn't explained or analyzed, just presented. He becomes one of the most interesting modern movie characters, ranking with Gene Hackman's eavesdropper in The Conversation and Jack Nicholson's Bobby Dupia in 5 Easy Pieces. Sonny and his zombie-like partner Sal hit the bank at closing time. A third Confederate gets cold feet and leaves early. The stick-up is discovered, the bank is surrounded, the live TV mini-cams line up across the street, and Sonny is in the position, inadvertently, of having taken hostages. Sal, John Cazale, is very willing to shoot them, a factor in all that follows. There are moments when Dog Day Afternoon comes dangerously close to the cliches of an old Pat O'Brien gangster movies and the great Lenny Bruce routine inspired by them. What a reference that I don't understand. He goes on to say, the Irish cop shouts into his bullhorn, "Come on out, Sonny," and nobody gets hurt. And Sonny's mother pleads with them from the middle of the street. But Lumet is exploring the cliches, not just using them. And he has a good feel for the big city crowd that's quickly drawn to the action. At first, Sonny is their hero, and he does a defiant dance in front of the bank, looking like a rock star playing to his fans. When it becomes known that Sonny's bisexual, the crowd turns against him. But within a short time, New York being New York, gay libbers turn on to cheer him up. The movie has an irreverent, quirky sense of humor, and we get some notions of the times we live in when the bank starts getting obscene phone calls and the giggling tellers breathe heavily into the receiver. There's also, in a film that's probably about 15 minutes too long, I don't know about that, an attempt to take a documentary look at the ways police and banks try to handle situations like this. And through it all, there's a tantalizing attraction of instant celebrityhood, caught for an instant when a pizza delivery man waves at the camera and shouts, "Hey, I'm a star." Great review. If you want to read his great movies entry, which is a little longer, and we've already gone way over. We've almost doubled the time I wanted this to be done in, but I'm not mad at that. The episode was really fun. So check out Roger Ebert's website, roberteater.com, for a Dog Day Afternoon great movies entry. What else to say? We're about to record a Patreon episode about all the other movies mentioned in this episode we just watched. So definitely subscribe if you want to keep listening to us talk, because we're going to go right into it. And I think my catchphrase I've decided to do is support your local cinema and don't forget to tip your concession staff, which is a thing I've never done before. I've decided I'm going to die on that hill. You got to tip these people, folks. All right, bye.